So we've seen three of the attack types that are for Burp Suite Intruder. We've looked into the sniper, we've looked into the details of the sniper attack, the battering ram attack, which was really interesting, the pitchfork attack, and then now, today we're actually going to look into the cluster bomb. So finally we come to the last of Intruder's attack types. For that matter, I should actually start the machine. I'm also already connected to their VPN, so to the TryHackMe VPN. Burp Suite is up and running. What else? I have my Mozilla Firefox session in there, so yeah, we're good to go. So the cluster bomb allows us to choose multiple payload sets, just like pitchfork. One per position, up to a maximum of 20. However, whilst pitchfork iterates through each payload set simultaneously, so this is the big difference, cluster bomb iterates through each payload set individually, making sure that every possible combination of payloads is tested. So every payload from every set with every payload from the rest of the sets. So there's gonna be a lot of requests. This actually escalates a lot. So it actually escalates really quickly. Let's use the same word list as before. So in this case, we have 3 usernames: Joel, Harriet, Alex, and 3 passwords: Joe, Emma, and skill. And in the case of the cluster bomb, in this situation, we're actually gonna combine each of these with each other. So 1-1, Joel with Joel, Joel with Emma, Joel with skill, Harriet with Joel, Harriet with Emma, Harriet with skill, Alex with Joel, Alex with Emma, Alex with skill. If I am correct, there would be 9 requests. So that's exactly the case. But this time, let's assume that we don't know which password belongs to which user. We have 3 users and 3 passwords, but we don't know how to match them up. In this case, we would use a cluster bomb attack. We will try every combination of values. So that's exactly what I said. Cluster bomb will iterate through every combination of the provided payload sets to ensure that every possibility has been tested. This attack type can create a huge amount of traffic, as I said, so be careful. Equally, when using Burp Community and its intruder rate limiting, be aware that a cluster bomb attack with any moderately sized payload set will take an incredibly long time. That said, this is another extremely useful attack type of kind. So we have 3 payload sets. So for example, we can see that if we look into the proxy, then send this to the intruder, it's a GET request either way, we can see that we have the cluster bomb attack. And as they say here, it's exactly what I said previously. So if I say username equals John and pass equals John in this situation, and we're actually gonna say this is a post request, we're looking into the cluster bomb attack, we do the auto thing, it actually fills up with the username and password. And if we look into the payloads, let's say that we have 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 5 admin 1 2 3, and then we have payload set number 2. Let's say this is for usernames: Mary, John, Andrew, and Christina. So in this situation, if we're using the cluster bomb, we have 2 payload sets with 4 words each. In this situation, we should see a total of 16 requests, which is exactly what we see here, regardless of the status, because this was a bogus type of request, but you get the point. Now, how many requests? So we have 3 payload sets. The first set contains 100 lines, the second contains 2 lines, and the third contains 30 lines. How many requests will Intruder make using these payload sets in a cluster bomb attack? So I would assume that is 100 times 2 times 30, which is 6,000. So yeah, that was the correct answer. Now, next, payloads. Let's see how we stand when it comes to the time. 5 minutes. So we've been very efficient so far. Now, that was a lot of theory, so kudos for reading through it. There will be plenty of practicals in the upcoming task, but first it is imperative that we understand how to create, assign, and use payloads. So we talked a lot about payloads, but now we're getting a little bit deeper into it. So switch over to the payloads subtab. So switch over to the payloads. The payload set section allows us to choose which position we wanted to configure a set for, as well as what type of payload we would like to use. So this is, let's say, payload 1 and payload type simple list, payload 2. We cannot modify them now because we're in the middle of an attack. So if we say pause, or if we just actually, what's going on? If we just discard this attack, we go back in here, we look into the payloads. Now we can actually select the payload type. When we use an attack type that allows only for a single payload set, sniper or battering ram, the drop-down menu for payload set will only have one option, regardless of how many positions we have defined. So when we use sniper, for example, where the sniper attack, we're only going to see only one payload set in there. If we're using one of the attack types that uses multiple payload sets, as we've seen, then there will be one item in the drop down for each position. Multiple positions should be read from top to bottom, then left to right. So for example, if we have another one position and MFA equals 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we do the auto thing and we select a cluster bomb attack, when we look into the payload sets, we should have 3 here, which is exactly what we have. The second drop down in this section allows us to select a payload type. By default, this is a simple list, which as the username, as the name suggests, lets us load in a word list to use. There are many other payload types available. Some common ones include recursive grab numbers, so we can see recursive grab numbers. We can actually become very, I would say, inspired, or maybe creative is the best word, and username generator. It is well worth perusing this list to get a feel for the wide range of options available. Now, payload options differ depending on the payload type we select for current payload set. A simple list will give us a box and a remove payload to and from the set. So as you see, the simple list, this is what it offers, and I can also remove, I can load, for example, from a file, I can clear, I can deduplicate, which is really useful, and I can also add from a preloaded list that's in Burp Suite. So for example, let's say passwords, it's going to preload with passwords. I can clear that up. We can also short words, can add the short words. I can clear that up. If we select a runtime file, this actually, the payload option changes. Custom iterator, of course, is going to change character substitution. And this actually, as I said, you can become very, very creative and very thorough, given that you have the Burp Suite Professional Edition. So let's go back to the simple list. Payload processing allows us to define rules to be applied for each payload in the set before being sent to the target. So for example, we could capitalize every word or skip the payload if it matches a regex. So we have a simple list as admin 1, 2, 3, John, Mary, Dana. We can go to payload processing and actually define the type of rule. We can add a prefix. So let's say the prefix is burp or whatever, and then say OK. Then every payload, so in this case every request, every payload here, if we have selected a sniper attack, it's going to be burp admin 1, 2, 3. So if we just actually start the attack, let's look at it. See, so it's burp admin 1, 2, 3, burp John, burp Mary, and so on and so forth for each. So in this case, the payload has been filled in here, and now it has been filled in here. All right, let's actually discard that. Going back here, finally we have the payload encoding, and of course you can do much more processing. As you've seen here, it's not only what I've shown you, but you can also add different type of processing. Match, replace, substring, modify, case, encode, decode, hash. This is really useful because in pen testing you'll actually encounter different situations where you have to kind of adapt to the situation. And this is very helpful because you have an all-in-one tool. Everything is in Burp Suite, so you don't have to use other tools, other fuzzers, other actually custom scripts to get what you want. It's all in here. That's why most of my penetration testing, when it comes to, for example, web applications, most of it happens in Burp Suite. Then it's also some manual review of the code, and of course it's also some manual inspection and maybe input validation within some input validation testing within the application itself. But a lot of it happens here inside Burp because I have everything here. I also have Autorize, which I use now and then when it makes the case to be used. But I very much like testing for authorization, authentication, IDORs, different types of authorization issues by hand, so to speak. Now, going back to here, we have the payload encoding section. This section allows us to override the default URL encoding option that are applied automatically to allow for the safe transmission of our payloads, because in some situations actually payloads can get distorted, can get malformed, and might not be processed the way we wanted them to be processed, and encoding actually sort of like ensures that our payload is processed in its intended way. So sometimes it can be beneficial to not URL encode these standard unsafe characters. Okay, so yeah, that's also the case, which is where this section comes in. We can either adjust the list of characters to be encoded or outright uncheck the URL encode these characters checkbox in here. So we can add, remove, or completely uncheck. When combined, these sections allow us to perfectly tailor our payload sets for any type of attack we wish to carry out. Which payload type lets us load a list of words into a payload set? A simple list. Which payload processing rule could we use to add characters at the end of each payload in the set? So add suffix. If we look back, payload processing, we do have the add suffix option, which is going to add whatever we want at the end of each payload. Alright, so now task number 10, it's a practical example, and I think we're going to leave this task 10, 11, 12, and 13. So for the next videos in this series.